Have you looked around a supermarket lately? It's hard to miss. Everywhere it shouts at us, high protein, on puddings, on bars, in drinks, even on chips. Protein has risen from a niche product for bodybuilders to a superstar of the health and wellness industry. Fitness influencers preach intakes of over 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, and the global market for these products has more than quadrupled in just a decade. On one hand, there's that loud, simple promise. More protein means more muscle, less fat, better performance. But at the same time, much quieter and more worrying notes are coming from longevity research labs. There, respected scientists warn that the very signaling pathways that make protein promote growth could, over the long term, increase the risk of chronic diseases such as cancer. We are therefore faced with an apparently insoluble contradiction, a true protein paradox. Is this nutrient the key to a strong, fit body, or a hidden accelerant that shortens our lifespan? The answer, and here's the good news, is not either or. The answer depends on context, and it is that context we will peel back layer by layer today. To understand why protein is so celebrated, we need to look at the scientific basics. The general recommended daily allowance is a modest 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. For many active people, and especially for athletes, however, that is, to be clear, by far not enough to reach their goals. Research in recent years has painted a very clear picture of why a higher intake can be beneficial. Two areas are in focus here: muscle health and weight management. For muscle building, protein is the absolutely essential building material. Without sufficient amino acids from food, the body cannot build new muscle fibers after a hard workout. And during weight loss, protein has a twofold effect. It fills you up better and longer than carbohydrates or fats, and it also revs up metabolism. The body uses up to 30% of the energy in protein for its metabolism, the so-called diet-induced thermogenesis. In other words, you burn calories while you eat. These convincing benefits have fueled the protein hype, but they tell only half the story. The other half is more complex and forces us to look deeper. How much protein is optimal for muscle growth? A landmark 2017 meta-analysis published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine by Morton and colleagues provided clarity. It pooled 49 high-quality studies with over 1,800 participants and reached a very precise result. A protein intake of up to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, combined with resistance training, leads to significantly greater gains in muscle mass and strength. The supplementing group gained on average 0.3 kilograms more fat-free mass and increased their 1-rep max by an impressive 2.5 kilograms more than the placebo group. But, and this is the crucial point, above that threshold of 1.6 grams per kilogram, there was no further statistically significant benefit for muscle mass. More is therefore not necessarily more. While the evidence for performance and body composition benefits thus relatively clearly supports increased intake, longevity research steps onto the stage with a big but. At the center of the controversy is a much-noted 2014 study by Dr. Walter Longo and his team, published in Cell Metabolism. Based on data from thousands of Americans in the NHANES third study, they reached an alarming result. In people aged 50 to 65 years, high protein intake, defined as 20% or more of daily calories, was associated with a 75% higher all-cause mortality and a 4-fold higher cancer mortality. A shocking finding. Particularly striking, this association was driven almost entirely by animal protein. The biological mechanism seems plausible. A high intake of amino acids, especially from animal sources, stimulates a signaling pathway mediated by the hormone IGF-1. IGF-1 is a potent growth factor. It tells cells it's time to grow and divide. What is desirable for muscle growth could, over decades, become problematic because this persistent growth signal can also promote cancer cell growth. But before we banish all protein sources from our diets, we must consider the scientific debate as a whole. Science moves on. A very recent comprehensive umbrella review from 2024 by Kulin and colleagues, which systematically summarized all previous meta-analyses, reached a different conclusion. It found no significant association between total protein intake and risk of the most common cancers such as breast, prostate, or colorectal cancer. The authors rated the available evidence for such a link as low or insufficient. The narrative of protein as a cancer driver is seriously questioned. How do we resolve this apparent contradiction? The answer lies in a factor we've only touched on: age. Recall the Levine and Longo analyses? They had a second, crucial finding that is often overlooked. In people over 65, the effect reversed completely. Here, high protein intake was associated with a 28% lower all-cause mortality and a 60% lower cancer mortality. Suddenly, protein becomes a shield rather than a risk. What's going on? The answer lies in a physiological process called anabolic resistance. As we age, our muscles become less sensitive to the growth-promoting signals of protein and exercise. You therefore need a higher dose to elicit the same muscle-building response, the so-called muscle protein synthesis. Whereas a young adult needs relatively small amounts, older adults require roughly 25 to 30 grams of high-quality protein per meal to overcome this threshold. Here, the paradox dissolves. In middle age, when the body still responds strongly to growth signals, chronically high protein intake via the IGF-1 axis could theoretically be problematic. In older age, however, when the body succumbs to age-related muscle loss, sarcopenia, the benefit of higher protein intake far outweighs the risk. It is no longer primarily about growth, but about preserving structure, function, and independence. Leading expert groups like the Protein Age Study Group therefore recommend for healthy adults over 65 an intake of 1.0 to 1.2 grams per kilogram body weight. What does this mean practically? It means we must say goodbye to blanket recommendations. The optimal protein strategy is personalized. For a healthy adult under 65, whose main goal is longevity, a moderate intake around 0.8 to 1 gram per kilogram, predominantly from plant sources, may be sensible. For an adult engaging in resistance training and aiming to build muscle, up to 1.6 grams is the evidence-based sweet spot. And for healthy people over 65, an intake of 1.0 to 1.2 grams is a key measure against frailty. But quantity is only one side of the coin. The other, perhaps more important side, is the source. And here the food industry comes into play. The protein hype has produced a flood of ultra-processed products that try to give us a clear conscience with a protein-rich label. A Spanish study that analyzed these products reached a sobering result. 91% of foods marketed as high protein were classified as less healthy. More than half were high in fat or sodium, and 1 in 4 was high in sugars or saturated fats. These products create a health halo. We think we are doing something good, but often consume junk food in new packaging. The solution is simple, but not always easy. Focus on whole food protein sources: lentils, beans, chickpeas, nuts, seeds, but also fish, eggs, and lean meats. A handful of almonds provide about 6 grams of protein, plus valuable fiber and micronutrients, without artificial additives. The key is not to cram more protein into our diet blindly. The key is to restructure our diet so we get protein from high-quality, unprocessed sources and distribute it intelligently across the day, ideally in portions of 25 to 30 grams per main meal. The protein paradox teaches one of the most important lessons in nutrition science. There is no magic formula, but there is an intelligent strategy based on science, context, and personal goals. And that strategy doesn't begin on the supermarket shelf with protein bars. It begins with understanding your own body. We'd like to thank you warmly for spending this episode with us. Your support and interest mean a great deal. We hope you gained interesting insights and useful food for thought. Stay curious, informed, and inspired. Together, we can shape a better future. As always, we wish everyone a long, healthy, and happy life. Until next time.